Have you ever sat in a room full of people, laughing, smiling, playing the part, but deep inside, you felt like you didn't belong there at all? Not because anyone said something wrong, not because you weren't good enough, but because your soul just didn't align. Welcome back to Chosen Being, a space for the ones who feel too deep. It's too different, to awaken a world that often doesn't understand them. Today, we're diving into something that many chosen ones experience, feeling like an outsider, even in places where they should feel at home. So if you've ever wondered, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just fit in and enjoy what everyone else enjoys? This video is for you, because sometimes God doesn't let you fit in, and there's a reason behind it. Let's talk about it. You tried, really tried, but it never felt right. Let's be honest, most of us didn't choose to feel different. We wanted the same things everyone else did: to be accepted, to be included, to blend in at school, at work, in friendships, even in family. And so we tried. We said yes when we wanted to say no. We dressed the part. We followed the rules. We did what was expected. And for a while it worked, on the surface, but inside was exhausting, because it's really hard pretending to be someone your soul isn't. My story, the six-figure job that looked like success. I still remember when I landed that big job, 6 figures, benefits, a respectable position. Something I could proudly tell my parents. Something society clapped for. And honestly, I wanted it to work. I wanted to love it. I showed up early. I performed, I played the game. But something inside of me was crumbling. Every day I felt like I was wearing a mask. Meetings felt like noise. Small talk felt fake. I felt drained, not fulfilled. And the worst part? I couldn't explain it to anyone. Because how do you explain to someone that everything looks right but feels wrong? How do you tell your family that the job they're so proud of is slowly crushing your spirit? When you're called to more, but you're scared of letting go. That's when the whisper began. That soft inner voice that kept saying, "This isn't your path. You're meant to heal. You're meant to serve in a different way." But I ignored it. I told myself I was just being ungrateful. I reminded myself how hard I worked to get here. I thought maybe I needed to try harder, think more positively. But the more I stayed, the more things started falling apart. Unexpected challenges at work, communication breakdowns, health issues, stress, sleepless nights. It's like the universe was closing every door I was trying to force open because I wasn't listening. I was trying to fit into a system I was never designed for. The fear of disappointing others. Then came the big fear. What will people say? How do I explain to my parents that I want to leave this perfect job to do energy healing? How do I tell them I want to follow a spiritual path, something that isn't secure, isn't predictable, and definitely isn't what they dreamed for me? And for a long time, my DIDN, single quotes, I stayed quiet. But that voice inside me never went away. In fact, it got louder, and so did the chaos, because when your soul signs a contract for a higher purpose, God won't let you settle. When God starts removing what you cling to, used to think I was cursed. Why did things fall apart the moment they started going well? I now realize I wasn't cursed. I was being redirected, every time I tried to plant roots where I didn't belong. God uprooted me, not out of punishment, but out of love. Because God knew something I didn't at the time. You can't fulfill a divine calling while trying to fit into a human box. Part 2, you can't fit in because you're not meant to stay there. Something you need to understand. You don't feel like you belong because you were never meant to. Chosen ones are wired differently. We sense more. We carry more. We see through the surface. And when you're born with that depth, that level of spiritual awareness, you simply can't stay small. But here's the problem. You live in a world that celebrates blending in, following trends, staying in line, doing what's expected. And so, every time you try to fit in, it's like squeezing your soul into a mold that was never made for you. Eventually, something breaks, and most often, It's you. The emotional cost of pretending to belong. Let's talk about this honestly. Do you know what happens when you constantly force yourself to be who you're not? You lose energy. You lose passion. You lose your voice. You start forgetting who you really are. You start people pleasing, saying yes to things that drain you, laughing when you want to cry, shrinking your light so others feel comfortable. And slowly your soul begins to whisper, "This isn't me. I'm not okay. I need more." But you silence it because what if people think you're weird? What if your family doesn't understand? What if they say, "You've changed. Do you think you're better?" This healing thing is just a phase. You begin hiding your light just to keep the peace. But guess what? That peace is fake. It's not your peace. Someone else's comfort at the expense of your truth. Stop apologizing for not fitting. And can I say something boldly? Stop apologizing for your spirit. You weren't made to fit into broken systems. You weren't made to follow a template. You're not meant to copy someone else's journey because yours was custom designed by God. And sometimes that custom design comes with isolation, with being misunderstood, with not fitting in at the dinner table conversations, with being called too sensitive, too intense, or too spiritual. But it's okay, because those labels, they're confirmation that you're different, and your difference is divine. Divine disruption. When God breaks the illusion, there comes a point where God will interrupt your life. Not gently, not politely, but forcefully. Why? Because you've been clinging to what's comfortable, not what's true. Let me share another personal truth. During that job, when I was ignoring my inner calling, everything looked fine. But behind closed doors, I was emotionally collapsing. I remember one night, lying awake at 3 a.m., crying silently into my pillow. Not because of a bad day, but because I felt like I was slowly disappearing. Like I had built a life on top of a lie. The lie that I could be happy doing something that didn't feed my soul. That moment changed everything for me because I realized I kept going like this. I wouldn't just lose myself spiritually. I'd lose myself entirely. The breaking point is the birthing point. Do you know what's interesting? Right after that breakdown, things started shifting. Yes, I still had fear. Yes, I still had doubts. Yes, I still faced resistance from family. But once I made the decision to follow my inner calling, to embrace energy healing, to explore the divine path I was being drawn, two doors began to open. Not overnight, but slowly, clearly, with divine timing. What I thought was the end of my success became the beginning of my becoming. Sometimes when God doesn't let you fit in, it's because He's calling you to lead something new. Part 3. After you surrender, the path unfolds the moment you surrender to your higher calling. If it's messy, it's confusing, or uncertain, is the moment your real life begins. That doesn't mean it becomes easy. It just becomes aligned. The work I began doing as a healer didn't bring me overnight success or instant applause, but it brought me peace. It brought me purpose. Slowly, it brought me people who saw me not just the version I had created to fit in. I started attracting clients who were deeply wounded but ready to heal. Conversations became deeper. Friendships became more authentic. My relationship with God grew. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt home. And that's what fitting in with your truth feels like. Your uniqueness. Is your assignment so often we ask, why am I like this? Why do I feel more? Why can't I be like everyone else? But the very things that make you feel different are the exact things that make you divinely equipped. Your sensitivity. It helps you feel what others can't say. Your intensity. It helps you see through illusions. Your solitude. It helps you hear God more clearly. You weren't built to fit in because your mission is too specific. You're not here to follow your boss. Here to build. You're not here to adapt. You're here to awaken. And sometimes, in order to do that, God isolates you. He hides you. He holds you back while others run ahead. Not because you're behind, but because He's preparing you for something that requires more depth. more character, and more obedience. When others don't understand your journey, let's talk about what happens next, when you finally accept your divine difference. Not everyone will cheer. Some will distance themselves. Some will say, "You've changed." Some will say, "It's just a phase." And the hardest of all, some of them will be people you love. I've had people stop calling friends who couldn't relate anymore. Relatives who rolled their eyes when I mentioned healing or energy work. But I kept going. Why? Because the people who needed my voice were still looking for it. And here's the truth. Your journey doesn't need to be understood by everyone to be valid. You're not living their story. You're living yours. Your story becomes someone else's. Survival Guide, here's the most beautiful part. All those years you felt left out. All the rejection. All the awkwardness. All the moments of "why am I like this?" They become your testimony. Because somewhere out there is a woman sitting on her bed at 2 a.m. crying because she thinks she's crazy for feeling so deeply. Somewhere, a man is questioning his worth because he doesn't relate to the world around him, and your story, your voice, your truth might be the thing that keeps them going. That's the gift of not fitting in. You were never meant to. You were meant to stand out so you could lead others out. Part 4, the lonely in-between. Where you find your strength, there's a space between who you used to be, and who you're becoming. And it's not always pretty. It's quiet. It's uncomfortable. It's confusing. This is the in-between season. You've left the old, but the new hasn't fully formed. You're no longer pretending. But you're not fully walking in purpose either. And that in-between, that's where most people quit. How to stay grounded when the path feels lonely. Be honest, this season feels isolating. The people who once understood you now feel distant. The things that once made sense now feel foreign. But here's the secret. This in-between is sacred. This is where God does his deepest work in you. When no one's watching, when no one's clapping, when there's no spotlight, and you feel invisible. In those moments, your roots go deep. Your faith grows not because you're thriving, but because you're trusting. You start learning how to ground your energy, maybe through daily prayers, sitting in silence with nature, journaling your rawest thoughts, crying without guilt, saying no without explanation. Because healing isn't glamorous. It's gritty, it's lonely, it's necessary. When everything crumbles, but you still choose faith. There was a time when I had just left my secure job. No income, no plan, just faith. Every day was a battle between fear and calling. There were mornings I wanted to go back to comfort, back to normal, back to blending in. But something inside me whispered, "You've come too far to go back now." And that voice, so soft, yet so steady, became my anchor. I began seeing signs, not big, dramatic ones, but subtle confirmations. A client message saying, "Your words changed my life." A moment of peace during meditation. It's an unexpected payment just when I needed it most. God never left me. He was just growing me. Alignment feels like home, not hype. Eventually, something shifts. You stop asking, "When will this make sense?" And you start trusting it already is. You find joy in small wins, peace in being alone, clarity in stillness. You begin making decisions not from fear but from alignment. Not, "What will people think?" but, "Does this feel true to my soul?" And that's when it hits you. This is what fitting in with yourself feels like. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing approval. You start standing in your power, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Part 5. The signs you're now aligned with your divine assignment after the struggle. The waiting, the inner battles. You begin to feel something shift inside you. Not a loud explosion, a quiet knowing, "I'm exactly where I need to be." So, what are the signs that you've stepped into alignment? They don't always look dramatic or glamorous. In fact, they're often simple, yet deeply profound. You're no longer triggered by rejection. You Don't beg to be invited anymore. You don't force friendships. You don't chase closed doors. You simply trust that if something didn't stay, it wasn't meant to. The old version of you would have broken down at the thought of being excluded. The aligned version of you. You smile and say, "Thank you, God. Protect my peace." You feel at home with yourself. You wake up and breathe easier. Your reflection feels real. Your choices feel lighter. Your relationships feel aligned. You stop performing and start living. The things you used to do to impress people no longer matter.